with the accident, like again, like we started the interview by talking about this kind of stuff, and I'm going, when I wrote my book, which was like like I said, a deep activist hole of emotional need ready to suck the life right out of you. That was my book. It was just, yep. I went through a lot. I didn't realize that. I'd go to counseling and they'd show, draw a straight line through the old computer paper that was hooked on together. They were all,
yeah.
And write, go to 1960 when you were born and write the good parts and the bad parts. And I remember going, this is fun. This is cool. It's like it's like my own little show, but it teaches you an awful lot. And I read all the books and I enjoyed that. And I started feeling a real appreciation for people who were, I think, a little bit more, not dredging the past, but a little more conscious about it. And it makes you deeper and it makes you understand other people's stuff. Well, for you, and I don't know how you did it, but at what point did you know I gotta get this back? After the accident?
Well, it's funny, because I mentioned earlier that English was one of my strongest classes in high school. I did double English in grade 13, and I'd get 20 out of 20 essays returned and A++. The only time, actually, I got in trouble once with classmates because I got an A++ on one of the assignments I turned in. And as was my habit, I'd stayed in the school library, skipped classes for 2 days to get it done, because 2 days past the deadline, because I totally just neglected it. Wrote it out and turned it in 2 days late and got A++. And some of the smarty girls in the class, hey, that's not fair. We turned ours in on time. So I got knocked down to A+, I think. But anyway, writing and expressing myself verbally have always been one of my strong points. Certainly, my dad put that into me, as well as my own reading influences. And so I've had a couple of people say to me over the years, I think there's a book in you if you ever feel like you could devote the time. And after my accident, which was 2008, I was totally myrtleized, and there was no clear answer as to whether I'd ever be able to return to being a performer.
But before you continue, what I should ask you to tell, I mean, I know what happened, but tell the audience what happened.
Right. Well, the short version of the story is I was in Australia on my third visit there to visit my daughter, who was starring in a TV show called The Saddle Club. And my wife and my daughter were down there. And I was in kind of a distressed mode, a little bit out of sorts, well, way out of sorts. I've learned to call what happened to me in the state I was in emotionally impaired. That is, I was so overwhelmed by emotion, I was not functioning clearly, just as if I was impaired by alcohol or drugs. Emotions can make us so upset and off course that we don't keep track of the reality around us properly. Ergo, in my case, emotionally impaired, I forgot they drive on the other side of the road in Australia for about 1 minute or less. And that's all it took to have a head-on collision on a little country road, 2-lane highway. At about, I think we were both going about 100 kilometers an hour, both vehicles. And yes, head on, I was torn to pieces, broken in 52 total injuries in the space of about 2 seconds impact. Thankfully, the other fella was not killed. He did have some injuries, but compared to me, he did well. He was in a big vehicle, a Land Cruiser, and I was in a little Toyota Corolla. So I had my car crushed down all around me because his car came up my hood and over the roof. And
that explains the pictures. I saw the pic. That explains it. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So I have no memory of it to this day. And I've learned to just call that nature being merciful, that I'm not haunted by that moment. But we've been able to figure out that I just had time to do this because my face was torn apart all around my arm. And of course, all over my body was crushed, broken, bleeding, torn. But my teeth are all in place. So Still have my own teeth, and everything else was, torn to bits. So they got me out of there, stuck me back together at the hospital in Melbourne, Australia, which was the closest center. And I spent just about 6 months, I guess, in hospital, from the point where they didn't think I'd live through the night to actually getting involved in physiotherapy in the months prior to leaving. And the doctors telling me I was the most motivated patient they'd ever had go through the place. They'd never seen anybody with just the determination to heal thyself and get back together, which, is rah, but to me, it was more like, what? Why isn't everybody like that? Why don't they all just, the thing is, when you're in hospital, your top job is to get the hell out of there. But I could see all around me, people are just kind of digging the vibe, lying in the bed, getting up, going to physiotherapy or not, going outside on the sidewalk for a smoke if they were mobile enough to do that, and just settling into the groove there. And I thought, this is madness. So I got home from that and spent some months just getting myself well enough to be at home. It was a terrible trip on the plane. I pushed myself to leave sooner than I actually should have. I was in such awful pain and distress getting on the flight home from Australia to. Did
the altitude have anything to do with that when you were up there?
No, I was in agony in the seat before we even lifted off the ground. It had taken, you haven't been outside the hospital environment to do anything except go to a couple of doctor's appointments in 6 months. I had no idea how out of shape I was for just regular living. So just getting to the airport and through customs and then onto the plane took everything I had. And I was already ashen and gray before we even lifted off the ground. So bless Air New Zealand, or New Zealand Air, I guess it's called, they saw my state and they had an empty first class bed, those beautiful ones where you just flake out and there's a TV in your own pod almost where you lie down. So they said, well, this is awful. We can't let you fly all the way across the Pacific like this here. We have one empty, you take it. So that's the only way I managed to put up with it, I guess. So yeah, some months later, the question started to come around to what do I do next? I was still pretty much immobile, on crutches or wheelchair if I had to go far. And some friends of mine said, well, you could take up public speaking. And the thing with that is you probably should have a book to back up your presentation as just a summation or a statement of, yes, this is my credentials on paper here, So I thought, whoa, book, right. Speaking, well, the last time I had to give a speech, I was like this with the speech notes in my hand because it's such a different experience from performing music. And I was able to break that down after a while when I started to anticipate what it would be like to take on speaking. And I realized that as a musician, not only are you physically, in my case, shielded by the guitar, call it a barrier, the force field between you and the people out there, the microphone stand, the music, which is, one facet of expression. And so all these things are kind of a barrier between you and judgment. Your innermost self is still protected. You're putting these things out on the line to be liked or not liked. But once I started speaking, I realized that it was the greatest performance high because you put away the guitar, you're speaking now, you're not singing and taking everybody to a different dimension. You're expressing your thoughts with your voice in that moment, you with people live before you. And if they don't like that, they really don't actually like you, because that's the essence of you. You're laying out there on the table. So when it goes well and people respond, then that's the most amazing affirmation there is.
And it's just you. That's the thing. There's no band. It's
Correct.
just you.
Correct. Well, see, I'd gotten used to doing solo musical performances for years prior to embarking on the speaking idea, but it's still, you're behind the safety of, yeah, well, they didn't like the music. It's not me they don't like. If you're called on to, analyze on that level. Thankfully, most times for many years now, I've been accepted mainly for the music. So that beginning the speaking was a really powerful feeling of confirmation that, as many people had said to me, well, your work on earth isn't done if you survive that ridiculous car crash. There must be a reason. And I started to feel like, okay, so the reason is that I can communicate helpful thoughts to people now that I've gone through that experience and learned something from it.